Hi, and welcome back to the Bookworm in Christ podcast. I'm Dr. Abna Kakari Ashiade, and on this podcast, I share book reviews, recommendations, and sometimes author interviews of Christian romance. And so today, I am going to discuss some of my favorite Christian romances or Christian women's fiction that feature female friendships, and that is why I am wearing this shirt. This is the jersey for my year group from Wesley Girls High School, aka Wegehe. Now, if you are in Ghana, you are Ghanaian, or you know about Wesley Girls, you know that we had our speech and prize giving day over the Valentine's weekend. And so my year group, the 05 aka MMV year group, went to receive the baton from the 2004 year group. And we are so excited as we prepare towards hosting the speech day next year, God willing. And so that is part of the inspiration behind today's episode, because this is where I made some of the most amazing female friendships which have lasted till today. And so without any further ado, I'm starting off with Bitter and Sweet by Rhonda McKnight, which was the first book of hers I read. And this features two sisters who are summoned by their grandmother to come back home to South Carolina, because it's time for her and their granddad to hand over the family business. Now, this starts off with the two sisters, Mariah and Sabrina, being estranged due to past tragedy in their family. And so when they go back home, we get to see the history behind the family business, and then we also get to see the history behind their estrangement. Another thing I love about this book is that it's dual timeline, and so we get to see their, I believe, great grandmother who started the family business. And then as the sisters, try to overcome their differences so that they can work together to revive the family business. Of course, it's a romance. And so each of them finds themselves falling in love with men who are basically the perfect match for them. But because they have such different personalities, especially the older sister, Mariah, who is, I should say, bitter about a lot of things. She has had disappointments in the past, from in love, in business, and family. And then Mariah, who's the younger one and has always sort of looked up to her big sister, seeking her approval, trying to let them have a good relationship, struggles to grapple with why her sister just can't stand her. Now, all those reasons are revealed, and I just love how Rhonda McKnight, weaves in family history into the present, how the past affects the present and then the future. And of course, the family business is a restaurant, and so there's a lot of food in here. And so, yeah, I highly recommend this. Next up, and I actually decided to read this next book after reading Bitter and Sweet because I enjoyed it so much. And that one is The Thing About Home, which is also set in the South, Low Country as it's called. Rhonda McKnight tends to set her recent books in that part of the US. And so this one follows Casey Black, who, after a failed vow renewal ceremony and public disgrace, goes back to her hometown, which actually she never knew about because her mother kept her away from her father's side of the family. And so she rediscovers this whole other side of her family who just loves her for the fact that she's her father's daughter. And again, this is also sort of a dual timeline story because she gets to read about the family's history through her great-grandmother's journals. And as she rediscovers who she is through her renewed understanding of her family's dynamics, she also gets to fall in love. And again, there's a lot of food in here. So, and particularly what I found very interesting in this one, now I forget the name, but I'll look it up and put it in text somewhere here. There's a particular aspect of African American culture, a group of people that we get deep insight into in this book, and I don't want to mispronounce it, so I'll just type it up here somewhere. But yeah, so these two are by Rhonda McKnight, and I highly recommend them. Also, she's coming out with a new book on my birthday, no less, this year, 8th September, and that is Writer in Residence, and I'm looking forward to that so much. And the cover sort of matches this as well, and it's also set in the Low Country. Next up is another book I really enjoyed. I'd never read any book by her, but the moment I started reading it, I just loved it, and that is Faithful. And Faithful follows 3 friends who are at different places in life. And so we have Sydney, who thought, she would have the picture perfect life, a husband, kids, and a thriving career. But on the verge of 40, she is the maid of honor for her little sister with no prospect in sight for herself. And now, just when it seems like she has accepted it, suddenly she starts to find herself being attracted to the most unlikely of people, someone she, should I say, had some prejudice about their character before. And then as the story progresses, she starts to see that sometimes you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. And then we have Dana, who is Sydney's best friend, who seems to have the perfect marriage. Now, her story shows us that not all that glitters is gold, because the cracks in her marriage start to show, and then it's a matter of whether they are going to make it work or give up on it. And I really loved that perspective of, how what may seem perfect on the surface may not be so, and that you have to fight for joy and for the ones you love. And then finally, we have Phyllis, who's also married. However, this is an aspect of Christian life that I think is not spoken about a lot. And that is where a couple who are married have one coming to Christ and the other doesn't necessarily believe. And now, in this case, it's Phyllis who comes to Christ after they are married, and she's been praying for God to bring her husband into salvation, and it seems like it's not happening. And then she finds herself facing temptation and then realizing that she's not as perfect as she thought. And I just love this because it gives so many different perspectives on the different ways love shows up, And so, yeah, I highly recommend this. And next up is, should I say, sort of the sequel to Faithful, and that is Cherished, also by Kim Cash Tate. Now, anyone who has read Faithful will know that Cherished sort of gives the villain in Faithful a chance to tell their story, sort of, and also a chance to show how life goes on after their villainy comes to light. Now, so this one follows Kelly and Heather, who are young women trying to figure their lives out in terms of love, relationships, their faith, their career, and so on and so forth. And so, for Kelly, there's sort of a second chance romance. And then with Heather, her whole life is upended due to certain choices she made in the past. And then, as God always does, he gives her a second chance at finding her own happiness. And so this is another really good depiction of female friendships and the importance of having a community you can rely on, especially when it seems like your life is upside down. Now, finally, this I have not read, and when I read the blurb again recently, I don't know why I haven't read it, but I'm definitely bumping it up my TBR. This is also by Kim Tate, and that is Though I Stumble. And as the picture shows on the cover, there are 4 women in this story, and each of them is traveling to a women's ministry conference. And each of them is coming with their own questions, their own experiences, and this weekend will be life-changing for them. Now, since I haven't read it, I'm just going to read the blurb. And so we have Stephanie London, who thought she'd heard from God when she moved to Hope Springs, North Carolina. But a tragedy in that small town left her so desolate. Now her husband's inattentiveness has pushed her over the edge. Bereft of hope, she travels home to St. Louis as a women's ministry conference kicks off. Though less than enthused to attend, new friendships offer strength and light. But what happens when the weekend ends and real life begins again? Trevor Langston grieves still the loss of her husband of 22 years. And so here we have a love after loss sort of trope. Now, 2 years later, her heart is breaking again as her oldest daughter's travails come to light. Traveling from DC to St. Louis for a women's conference seems the last thing she should do, given the circumstances. But in St. Louis, her path crosses with someone new, and her world turns upside down. Will it only lead to more heartbreak? Jillian Mason can't wait to attend the Living Word Women's Conference. She's done their Bible studies for years and expects God to show up in an amazing way. But the weekend delivers something unexpected, a discovery about her husband. As the state of her marriage hangs in the balance, Jillian is suddenly anxious about returning home. Faith Langston has always been a girl after God's heart. She loves Living Word studies and registered early for the conference. But at the end of her college sophomore year, she finds herself in circumstances she never imagined, with a heart that has strayed from God. She makes it to St. Louis nonetheless, with her boyfriend in tow. But how will she find her way back to God? This sounds so interesting. And so basically, 4 women in different seasons of life converge at a women's conference with a theme that charges them to run in hot pursuit for Christ. But how do they run when challenges seem insurmountable? And can they help one another navigate the difficult terrain? Yeah, so that sounds really good. Now, because it's Valentine's month, I set up a surprise book date for members of my book club. Anyway, and so I thought I would bring on a sample. I did this for myself, but mainly to show what it looks like and what can be expected. And so usually would have some clues to the tropes in the book. And so this one has this month's trope, which is Friends to Lovers. On the Redeemed Romance Read Along, this month is Friends to Lovers. And then we also have Forbidden Romance, and I should say Sports Romance, and that is why this one has Milo, which is the drink for champions. I think that used to be the tagline. Nestle should probably sponsor me for this free ad. Anyway, this isn't sponsored. And then we have some chocolates, And usually this has tea, and then this lovely Valentine heart, pen, and this cute tiny reading journal I customized. Now I'm going to show you what it looks like on the inside. And so on the front we have my book club sticker, and then when you open it, in the very first page you have this tiny how-to guide on how to use the reading journal, and then we have a section for our books of the month. Now I have 4 book clubs. The first one is the Love and Faith book club, where we read Christian romance, and then we have the Galentine book club where we read African fiction. And then we have the Bible book club where we are reading through the Bible, and then the Galentine kids club, which is for kids. And so I have 2 pages for the book club tracker, and then there's a reading log page, about 2 of them, and then the other sheets are left blank. And so one of my friends said she would use this as a to-do list. I'm going to use this as a mini book review. And so as you can see, like it literally fits in the palm of your hand. There are a few still available. If you're interested, just let me know. But yeah, that's my mini reading journal. Now I'm not going to reveal what book is in this until another episode. And so based on the tropes, if you can guess what it is, maybe you will win something, or maybe you win one of these surprise book dates. So I'll put the tropes in the description box so that people can guess. Okay, now since this is also a new month, yes, I'm posting late, but that's okay. I'm going to reveal my book club's books of the month. And so for the Love and Faith book club, we have a second chance romance, and the cover is so gorgeous. And so drum roll please, we are reading Divine Hearts by Karen Oke, and this is the first in the prophetic love story series. Now let me tell you, I enjoyed this so much. I'll probably do a review later on, but yes, this is what we are reading in the book club, in the Love and Faith book club. And then in the Galentine book club, we are reading, drum roll, My Other Husband by Dorothy Kumsin. Now, interestingly enough, one of the tropes is second chance, but not the romantic kind. And so I thought it would be fitting for our first book of the month, since for the first month in the Redeemed Romance Reading Challenge, we were doing second chance. And so that's why I picked these 2. If you'd like to join us, send me a DM, and then we'll add you to the book club. But I'm excited to discuss this with the rest of the book club. Okay, so that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this. Have you read any of the books I mentioned? Which of them are you putting on your TBR? Let me know in the comments. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. If you are listening to the podcast, don't forget to follow. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Bookworm in Christ, and on TikTok at Bookworm in Christ. Yeah, so that's it for the books I highly recommend that feature some amazing female friendships in Christian romance or Christian women's fiction. So I will speak to you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Bye.